People love to say you can feel joy in the air at weddings. That day, the air was heavy, not with sadness, no, nothing so obvious. It was heavy the way a room feels when everyone is holding their breath without realizing it. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light over silk tablecloths and polished marble floors. A string orchestra played softly, every note perfectly rehearsed. Laughter drifted from every corner of the ballroom like proof that this was a fairy tale come true. My daughter had married a millionaire, a young one, self-made, handsome, the kind of man magazines like to put on glossy covers with words like asterisk, visionary asterisk, and asterisk, genius asterisk printed beside his smile. He stood at the center of it all, greeting guests like a king welcoming loyal subjects, confident and generous, shaking hands that trembled with admiration. Everyone said they were the perfect couple. I nodded when people said it to me, smiled, thanked them. Accepted congratulations like a script I'd memorized. What else does a father do when his only daughter marries a man the world approves of? Still, something was wrong. I noticed it when she walked down the aisle. She was beautiful, achingly so. The kind of beauty that steals the air from a room. Her dress flowed like a whisper, lace delicate against her skin. Her hair was pinned just the way her mother used to do it when she was little. The guests gasped, phones lifted. Someone near me wiped away tears, but my daughter didn't look at the crowd. She looked at me, just for a moment. And in that moment, her eyes searched my face the way they used to when she was a child and couldn't find me in a crowded room. The same look she had when she scraped her knee and tried to be brave. The same look she had the day her mother died, standing in a black dress too big for her small body. A silent question. I smiled at her because that's what fathers do. I nodded because that's what the world expected. She turned toward the altar. The vows were perfect, of course they were. Carefully written, emotionally calibrated. He spoke about partnership, about protection, about building an empire together. The crowd sighed at all the right moments. My daughter's voice shook when she spoke, but people mistook that for nerves or love or happiness so overwhelming it spilled into tears. I knew better. I'd heard that tremble before. At the reception, champagne flowed like water. Politicians, executives, celebrities' faces I'd only ever seen on screens laughed loudly and slapped the groom on the back. Everyone wanted a piece of his success. Everyone wanted to say they were there at the beginning. He played the role flawlessly. He kissed my daughter's cheek at the right moments. He rested a hand at the small of her back, just firm enough to look protective. He answered questions for her before she could open her mouth. People called it attentiveness. I called it control. But still, I said nothing, because saying something, asterisk, anything asterisk, would have made me the bitter old father who couldn't let go. And my daughter had begged me, weeks before the wedding, "Please, Dad, just trust me," so I trusted her. Or at least, I tried. Then came the dance. The DJ announced it with a practiced warmth, and the room softened. Lights dimmed, conversations hushed, someone sniffled. My daughter took my hand, and for the first time that day, her grip was tight. Too tight, we stepped onto the floor. The music began. An old song I used to play in the car when she was small. I felt a sudden, sharp ache in my chest. Memories flooded me, teaching her to ride a bike, bandaging scraped knees, braiding her hair before school when her mother was too tired. She rested her head lightly against my shoulder. "You okay?" I whispered. "Yes," she said quickly, too quickly. We swayed. Applause faded into a distant hum. The room blurred at the edges. For a moment it felt like the world had shrunk back down to just us, father and daughter, like it had been for so many years. Then I felt it, a slight movement, careful, deliberate. Her hand slipped into the pocket of my suit jacket. I stiffened instinctively, then forced myself to relax. To anyone watching, it looked like nothing more than a tender gesture. A daughter holding her father a little closer. She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you more," I said, my voice thick. She pulled away first, smiling for the audience. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. The groom stepped forward, beaming, already reaching for her hand. I clapped. I smiled. I played my part, but my heart was pounding. Later, much later, when the cake had been cut and the guests were busy drinking and dancing, I excused myself. I told no one where I was going. I walked down a quiet hallway lined with gold, framed mirrors, until I found a small restroom meant for staff. I locked the door. My hands shook as I reached into my pocket. The envelope was plain, no writing on the outside. Just my name, scrawled small, like she didn't want anyone else to notice. I sat down heavily, my knees suddenly weak, and opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, 3 words, written unevenly, pressed too hard, ***, Dad, help me, ***, the room tilted. For a moment, all I could hear was the muffled music from the ballroom, laughter bleeding through the walls like mockery. My chest tightened, breath coming shallow. 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind, each worse than the last. Help her how, from what? From him asterisk. I read the note again and again, as if more words might appear if I stared long enough. They didn't. I folded the paper carefully, too carefully, like it might break if I wasn't gentle. My reflection stared back at me from the mirror, older than I felt, paler than I should have been, eyes wide with something dangerously close to fear. I washed my face, straightened my tie, practiced my smile, then I stepped back into the light. The groom was laughing, surrounded by admirers. My daughter stood beside him, her smile flawless, her eyes empty. She caught my gaze, just for a second. And this time there was no question in her eyes, only trust. That was when I understood the truth, clear and terrifying. This wedding was not a celebration. It was a warning, and whatever my daughter was trapped in, whatever darkness hid behind the money and smiles and perfection, I was now a part of it too. I slipped the envelope back into my pocket, and I made myself a promise. No matter how powerful the man she had married, no matter how perfect the illusioned, I would find a way to help my daughter. Even if it cost me everything, here it is, slow, tense, and heavy with the kind of betrayal that hides behind smiles. The morning after the wedding, the house was too quiet. No laughter, no clinking of cups, no familiar sound of my daughter padding barefoot down the hallway, humming off, key the way she always had. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. The envelope lay in my jacket pocket, folded and unfolded so many times it was already soft at the edges. *Dad, help me. 3 words, no explanation, no instructions, just trust, and trust was something I had learned to respect. I didn't call her, not that day, not the next. I knew better. If she had slipped me that note in secret, then speaking openly would only put her in danger. Whatever she was facing, it lived in the spaces where no one was watching. So I watched, from a distance at first. Through screens, through stories people told me proudly. Social media was flooded with images of them. Honeymoon sunsets, luxury hotels, champagne glasses held up against endless blue skies. People commented hearts and fire emojis, calling them goals and perfection . I studied her face in every photo. She smiled in all of them, and in none of them did her eyes smile back. When they returned from their honeymoon, I was invited to dinner at their new home. A mansion, really glass walls, marble floors, a view that swallowed the horizon. Everything about it screamed openness and light. It was the loneliest house I'd ever stepped into. Staff moved silently, efficiently. Doors opened before we reached them. Wine appeared before anyone asked. My daughter sat at the long dining table like a guest, not an owner. She waited until her husband spoke before speaking herself. "Dad, try this," he said, cutting into her food before sliding the plate toward her. "You always liked it." She nodded, thanking him softly. I watched her hands. They shook, not enough for anyone else to notice. Not enough to spill a glass or draw attention. Just enough for a father who had held those hands when they were small, who knew every scar and freckle, to see the truth written in muscle memory. He spoke for her constantly about her hobbies, her future plans, her feelings. She's never liked big crowds, he said, smiling. She gets anxious with money, he laughed. She prefers it when I handle things, he concluded, like a loving confession. People nodded, impressed by his devotion. I swallowed my anger with every bite. After dinner, I asked if I could speak with my daughter alone. Just a moment, I said. A father's privilege. He smiled. Of course he did. But he didn't leave. He busied himself across the room, pretending to check messages, his presence stretching like a shadow. My daughter perched on the edge of a couch, her posture careful, guarded. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She smiled. "I'm great, Dad." The lie slid out too smoothly. I reached for her hand. She flinched barely, but she flinched. "Are you happy?" I asked. Her eyes flicked toward him, back to me. "Yes," she said again, louder this time. That was all I was allowed. Later, as I walked through the house toward the restroom, I noticed doors that were locked. Offices with fingerprint scanners, security cameras placed not just outside, but inside too, in hallways. In corners watching her, I began to understand the shape of the cage. Over the next weeks, I learned what no one else saw. Friends stopped calling her. Invitations dried up. When I asked why she hadn't visited an old friend from college, she shrugged and said, "We've grown apart," but she hadn't grown apart from anyone. She had been pulled away. I noticed her phone never left his side. If it rang, he answered. If a message arrived, he glanced first. Once I saw her reach for it instinctively and stop when he cleared his throat. He controlled the money, too. Not because she lacked it. She had her own inheritance, carefully saved, carefully planned. But somehow, every account had been merged. Every decision required a signature. Every expense was justified as simplifying things. I asked a simple question one afternoon, pretending curiosity. "Did you sign a prenup?" Her smile vanished for half a second. "Yes," she said. "What did it say?" She hesitated. I don't remember all of it. That was when the cold settled into my bones. No one signs a document worth millions without remembering it, unless they were never allowed to read it properly. Unless love had been used like a blindfold. The betrayal was not sudden. It was layered, patient, calculated. He hadn't stolen her with force. He had convinced her she was safer without choices. The final confirmation came by accident. I was leaving their house one evening when I heard raised voices behind a closed door. Not shouting, never shouting. His voice was calm, controlled. Hers was barely audible. "I don't like when you question me," he said softly. "I wasn't. You were. Silence. I do everything for you." Another pause. "You don't want to be ungrateful, do you?" The door opened suddenly. He smiled when he saw me. She stood behind him, pale, eyes lowered. On the drive home, my hands clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. I finally understood what that note really meant. Asterisk, help me, asterisk, didn't mean asterisk, save me loudly, asterisk. It didn't mean asterisk, confront him, asterisk. It meant asterisk, see me, asterisk, because the most dangerous prison isn't built with bars. It's built with comfort, money, and a story so beautiful that no one believes the woman whispering from inside it. And the cruelest betrayal of all wasn't just his. It was the world's willingness to believe him. Here we go. This is where the story slows down and sharpens. Anger is loud. It demands action. It begs for confrontation, for slammed doors and raised voices. For a moment, just one moment, I let myself imagine it, grabbing him by the collar, exposing him in front of everyone who praised him, tearing the mask from his face and watching the world finally see what I saw. But anger would have cost my daughter everything. So I learned patience. I became the father-in-law everyone trusted. I laughed at his jokes, complimented his business instincts, praised his discipline and structure. I listened when he spoke about markets and investments, nodded thoughtfully, asked harmless questions that made him feel admired. Men like him loved being admired, and while he talked, I listened. I noticed patterns, dates, names repeated in conversations. Companies mentioned casually, as if they were nothing. I wrote everything down when I got home, addresses, timelines, small inconsistencies that most people would dismiss. Meanwhile, I watched my daughter relearn how to disappear. She spoke less, smiled more. She dressed the way he preferred, elegant, muted, careful. Her laughter became rare and rehearsed. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, I saw flashes of the girl I raised. A tight jaw, a clenched fist, a breath held too long. I needed to reach her without alerting him, so I went back to the language we had always shared. Memory. I sent her books we used to read together, with passages, underlined lines about courage, about choice, about women who refused to be erased. Inside the covers, I wrote nothing suspicious, just dates, old jokes, references only she would understand. She never thanked me out loud, but one day she wore a necklace I'd given her when she was 16. Something simple, something he had never chosen. It was enough to tell me she was listening. I found allies where I hadn't expected them. An old friend from my working years, now a quiet but ruthless corporate lawyer. A former accountant who owed me a favor and hated men who hid behind numbers. A journalist who had once tried to expose financial predators and had been silenced with settlements and threats. I never told them names at first. I asked questions instead. What happens when a prenup is signed under pressure? How clean does money have to be before no one asks where it came from? What makes investors nervous? Their answers formed a picture, and in that picture I finally saw his weakness. He didn't fear love, he didn't fear law, he feared exposure. His empire was built on speed, not stability. On confidence, not transparency. Investors believed in him because everyone else did. His reputation was the foundation, and foundations crack when enough weight is placed on the same fault line. All I had to do was wait for him to become careless. He always did. Confidence made people sloppy. Months passed. The world continued to applaud him. Awards, features, invitations. Each success made him bolder, more dismissive, more certain that no one could touch him. He began to underestimate me. That generation doesn't understand how things work now. I once heard him say about men my age. They're too sentimental. He was right about one thing. I was sentimental. I loved my daughter more than my own life. And love makes patience dangerous. One evening she came to my house alone, no driver, no assistant. She said it was spontaneous, but I knew better. Her hands shook as she wrapped them around a cup of tea, the steam fogging her glasses. I can't do this forever, she said quietly. I didn't rush her. I didn't interrupt. I feel like I'm disappearing. She continued. Like if I stop smiling for even a second, everything will fall apart. You're still here? I said. I see you. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I didn't ask you to save me, she said after a long pause. I asked you to stand with me. I reached across the table and took her hands firm, steady, real. I'm already standing, I said. And I'm not moving. That night, we talked honestly for the first time in months. About the contracts she hadn't understood. About the surveillance disguised as security. About the fear of retaliation if she left too suddenly. We didn't plan revenge, we planned freedom. From that moment on, everything had purpose. Every document copied. Every message archived. Every careless comment recorded. He thought he was winning. He thought silence meant surrender. But silence was my weapon. And while he built towers of glass and steel, I was laying something far stronger beneath his feet. Time, because revenge isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It waits, and I had learned exactly how to wait. Here it is, quiet, controlled, unbreakable. The end didn't come with shouting. No slammed doors, no dramatic confessions. No courtroom spectacle with flashing cameras and angry headlines that would have been too easy and too kind. It began with small things barely noticeable, even to him. An investor dinner canceled at the last minute. A board meeting postponed due to scheduling conflicts. A polite email from a partner requesting clarification on a minor discrepancy in the books. Nothing alarming, nothing urgent, just questions. Questions are dangerous. They spread. I watched from a distance as confidence slowly gave way to irritation. He laughed it off at first, calling it routine. He was used to being admired, not examined, but admiration doesn't read footnotes. Examination does. The journalist published the first piece quietly buried deep in the financial pages, carefully worded, legally flawless. No accusations, just patterns, just numbers that didn't quite align with the image he sold. Investors noticed. Then the second article came, then the third. Suddenly, meetings required lawyers. Lawyers required explanations. Explanations required truth or something close enough that it could survive scrutiny. His empire had been built on speed. Speed doesn't survive scrutiny. Behind closed doors, the panic started. I saw it in his posture, in the way his jaw tightened when someone challenged him, in the way his voice sharpened when my daughter asked a simple question he wasn't prepared for. For the first time, he was losing control. And control was the only thing he had ever loved. The legal part came next, quietly, methodically. The prenup he had relied on, his favorite shield, crumbled under inspection. It turned out that signatures made under emotional pressure, without independent counsel, were not as unbreakable as he believed. Clauses that favored him too heavily raised red flags. Assets he had quietly folded into his empire didn't belong to him at all. He called it betrayal. I called it correction. The day my daughter told him she was leaving, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't ask permission. She handed him a folder. Inside were copies of everything he thought she didn't understand. Contracts, emails, records, proof. I want a divorce, she said calmly, and I'm taking what's mine. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. Not powerless, but exposed. He threatened, of course he did. He spoke about consequences, about reputations, about what happens to people who challenge him. She listened, then she stood up. I already know what happens, she said. I watched you do it to yourself. The fallout was swift but controlled. Investors withdrew not out of fear, but out of doubt, and doubt is fatal in his world. Boards distanced themselves. Invitations stopped coming. The praise that once followed him like a shadow evaporated. No scandal. No spectacle, just absence, and absence to a man like him was unbearable. My daughter moved out quietly. No dramatic exit, just a few bags, her most important belongings and her dignity intact. The house that once felt like a cage became just another property he couldn't enjoy. Weeks later, she came to my house. No makeup, no security, no rehearsed smile. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where she used to do homework, where she once spilled juice and cried like the world was ending. I made coffee. She laughed when I burned the toast. We didn't talk about him. We didn't need to. Later that evening, music played softly from an old radio. Without thinking, she stood and held out her hand. "Dance with me?" she asked. We moved slowly across the kitchen floor, barefoot, laughing when we bumped into the table. There were no cameras, no applause, no audience, just freedom. As we danced, I thought about revenge, how people imagine it as destruction, as cruelty, as pain returned in equal measure. But the sweetest revenge isn't destruction. It's survival. It's watching someone lose the power they never deserved, without becoming what they were. He thought he married into a fortune. He never realized he married into a family that protects its own. And as my daughter rested her head on my shoulder, finally at peace, I knew something with absolute certainty. The perfect wedding had been a lie. But this moment, this was real.